And so we're going to talk about both vulnerabilities. Dr. Knabb, I think sometimes when people think tropical systems and see the forecast, they go, okay, this is a coast problem. And it will be, as it makes its way close to or even onshore. So we start with the coastal impacts, but we're not going to sleep on the inland impacts either.
No, absolutely not. And we're going to give you some tangible things that you can be doing now to get ready for the potential impacts, realizing in a place like South Carolina that our population, for good reason in that beautiful state, both coastal and inland, has been going up.
Yeah.
And recently, the state of South Carolina has updated their evacuation zone. So I urge you in South Carolina to go to scemd.org and make sure you know which evacuation zone you're in. And you might actually live in a place that didn't used to be in an evacuation zone and now is.
Dr. Knabb, we've talked about this in the past. South Carolina really has their act together when it comes to online resources. They have a great app that you can use that can be a vital resource for you.
Absolutely. So get these resources and start taking advantage of them now and plan today where you would go and how you would get there if you were told to evacuate. That goes for Georgia, that goes for Virginia, that goes for North Carolina. All of these states have at least the potential for storm surge driven evacuation issues, but also wind and inland flood driven evacuation issues. So this is what you need to be thinking about. Nobody needs to evacuate right now, but plan for possible evacuation. Have a plan if you live in a storm surge evacuation zone. If you live in a high rise in a storm surge evacuation zone, high rises on the coast of South Carolina are not safe places to be when there's storm surge. You don't want to be stuck in a high rise in a power outage when there's storm surge in the area. Any structure that's unsafe from wind, including mobile homes, absolutely. Nursing homes. How many times have we seen people get into dangerous situations when they're left at nursing homes? If you know somebody who's in a nursing home, figure out the plan today. And then finally, anybody who's at risk for inland flooding. You mentioned this earlier tonight already, Mike. Think about at least the possibility of staying at higher ground so you don't have to have water rescues come get you.
Well, these are good points. Because something like a nursing home, you may need to be thinking, we could see effects as early as this weekend, depending on the movement of the storm. So it's Thursday evening. This may happen, a lot of people go, well, it came out of nowhere, and we don't want this to be a came out of nowhere. It's going to likely occur.
Yeah, here it is Thursday night, and we might go into a watch phase maybe Saturday or Saturday night. Now, surf, rip currents are going to be an issue. Storm surge could be an issue. And it's not just, if this is the GFS, if it's right, you could have a landfall that brings surf, rip currents, high waves, storm surge, everything. And then if it goes inland, like the GFS is saying, then you might think, okay, well, by Tuesday, it's all done. But here comes Umberto in between the Carolinas and Bermuda, and it will keep the rip current and high surf risk high all the way into the middle to latter part of the week, well after potential of melt is inland.
And that may extend beyond places where landfall happens. So if you live like on the Jersey Shore, you could experience some high waves and rip current danger there.
All the way up into New England, the coast of Maine, we could lose people if we aren't careful at the ocean from both of these systems. So only swim or spend time at the beach near lifeguards. Got to assume those rip currents are present. And if you're caught, stay calm and float. Once you're out, go parallel to the shore and call for help if you're unable to swim. The lifeguarded beaches might be fewer and farther between this time of year, so might want to just stay out of the water.
Yeah, very good point indeed. Now, we're also looking for the potential for some inland flooding with a slow-moving system.
Yeah, we have a long history of devastating flood events in South Carolina and North Carolina, and this is just one model run from the Euro just for Monday and Tuesday, showing the potential for very heavy rainfall. GFS would be a little farther to the left, but that's just Monday and Tuesday. It's at least possible that it gets trapped in a cutoff low, and once it starts raining around the time of landfall,
there have been some notorious flood and landslide makers. I know both of us worked in that market. Even just heavy rain events sometimes would lead to these landslides that could shut down roadways. But obviously, Dr. Knabb, when we have these tropical systems, it is a widespread stretch of very heavy rain like what we saw with Helene.
Yeah, and as bad as Helene was, and it was the worst disaster in western North Carolina history, you might be thinking, well, that's really never happened before. Not on the scale of Helene, but we have had, Mike, a number of relatively recent systems that have brought devastating and deadly flooding to this same area of the country. This is not the first time.
The Southern Appalachians is so vulnerable, right? I go back to 2004 season. We had Francis. There was kind of a primer for Hurricane Ivan that really dealt a heavy blow to Western North Carolina.
Yeah, because they were only a couple weeks apart, and Francis brought several inches of rain to Western. 8 people in the state of North Carolina from Ivan, and there was a lot of damage and landslides. And people kind of forgot about that around the country because of what Ivan did closer to the coast. But that was just a preview of what was going to happen only 4 years ago with Tropical Storm Fred.
Yeah, and this one yet again. And, you know, we look at the damage
Catastrophic
from
flood in western North Carolina, just not on the scale of Helene. We lost 6 people in Crusoe, North Carolina. They were all in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and it was from landslides, mudslides. More than 200 structures were destroyed in one of the counties in western North Carolina. So if you look back to those systems, you can't say that Helene was the first time this has ever happened. It's just that the first time it's happened on this large a scale. So we knew the area was vulnerable, and now we know way more about just how vulnerable it can be. So we got to get flood insurance. We have to have evacuation plans so that when we get the next Helene, we can save lives.
What's so interesting about all this is, generally speaking, the mountains is what makes it so enticing to be there, right? And by and large, the weather there is usually pretty good almost year-round, right? But when it comes to the tropics, it's a different story because the mountains then work against you.
Yes, they absolutely do. They squeeze out more moisture, and then the water that does fall pools in the lower spots, and gravity takes water and rocks and mud down slope, and it's a devastating kind of force. But it's in many ways similar to storm surge in that it doesn't happen very often in one particular spot. I mean, just what you said, Mike, about the Southern Appalachians being one of the most beautiful places to live and the weather doesn't usually get too bad. In most hurricane-prone areas, most of the time the weather's really, really good, but every once in a while you got to deal with the threat of a catastrophic disaster. So we've got to look at these Helene numbers and really drill into our minds that hurricanes and tropical storms are not just coastal events. We have just as much of a hurricane problem in the Appalachians as we do on a coastline in Florida. It's just for a different reason.
Yeah, I know we're focused on western North Carolina right now, but there are other areas that could see some very heavy rain that have a similar setup. Parts of southwest Virginia could get in on some very heavy rain out of this event. Parts of eastern Tennessee, even upstate South Carolina has a decent bit of terrain.
Absolutely. And when you look at where all the flash flood warnings were in Helene, that drives your point home. Yeah. And they weren't just everyday flash flood warnings. Look at all of these flash flood emergencies, including one in the Atlanta area. Yeah. So many of us are vulnerable to catastrophic and life-threatening flooding with inland tropical systems. So all of these past events, I think Helene has probably convinced everyone, okay, we need flood insurance. Okay, maybe we need to think about evacuation plans. We get it now because of the scope of the event. But there are other mountainous areas in the eastern U.S. that didn't get dramatic effects from Helene. Farther north, you need to learn from what happened in Helene and be thinking about it's not just about water. Look at all the landslides that occur. I-40 got blocked in Tropical Storm Fred. Helene wasn't the first time that happened.
Well, do you think it's one of the circumstances, though, it has to affect you first before you realize how bad it can be?
Yeah, coastal people deal with that same mindset. So all of us collectively need to prepare for the next disaster in a place we don't think it can happen.